Welcome to another live cast where you have an opportunity to learn from industry experts, some actionable insight from marketing. I got another great speaker here today, Forrest Layton, who's the head of marketing for CB Insights. Forrest has been a longtime client of ours and a relationship that we really value over the years. Forrest has run marketing in a number of different companies, and now in this company, a SaaS-based company, very fast-growing, CB Insights. Forrest, welcome to the show.
Great, John. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here and definitely value the relationship. It's been a long and a good one. So,
excellent. Well, I think in your new role, Forrest, you of anybody, and I talk to a lot of people in the industry. You've got this passion for marketing measurement, and I think in our conversations, one thing that I've discovered is you're probably two steps ahead of a lot of other companies right now in terms of insights that you're gathering from your programs, from your campaigns. What have you found that has worked here versus maybe in other environments that might be valuable for others to pick up on?
yeah, cool. Well, thanks for that. I appreciate that, and I don't always feel that I'm two steps ahead, so it's nice. It's nice to hear that once in a while. I think for us, I'd say I put it down to rule number one: hire a data scientist. and I say that half jokingly, but it was one of the best things that we were able to do. It's in every organization I've been in over the years, I always feel like I walk into the same issue, right? Lots of data, lots of different places, really hard to get meaningful measurement. The basics are there, but getting to actual real meaning and diving beneath the covers always seems to be a bit of a challenge. So having obviously having the right tool set is one thing, but you need the skill set, right? And marketers, we're not all born with the DNA of we're going to figure out how to measure everything and figure out what makes sense and what doesn't,
Exactly. A lot of companies want to hire a data scientist, and they often find, at least I find with our clients, that budget has been an issue, that it's a real luxury to get that kind of role. How has that worked out at CB Insights with a data scientist? I mean, that's fantastic that you're able to make that hire.
Yeah, it was one that we had to. It took a little bit of convincing, obviously, to but it was such an important one for us because and the thing that I have at CB Insights, which hasn't been my issue in other organizations, is the influx of inbound, right? So we have thousands and thousands of leads that are coming in on a regular basis, right? We have multiple systems. We have a bunch of complexity, some of which is probably not needed, but it's just like any organization as it grows up and is growing fast, you start adding a bunch of tech and a bunch of different stuff happens. But the idea was that to get to the real metrics and be able to understand and really be able to drive a difference of how to make sure we get the right way to identify leads as they're coming in the top of the funnel, how we're able to convert them in the middle of the funnel, and then how we're able to drive more close one revenue. We needed to dive a level deeper, and we couldn't do it with our current skill set that we had. We really needed somebody who had that kind of analytics, data science background to help. And it was the best hire I've made in a very long time. So I'm so pleased with her, and she's such a great asset to the team.
Yeah, maybe just kind of double clicking into that a little bit. How does that work organizationally? Is she dedicated to your efforts 100%? Is she working for you guys? Is it a centralized function? I ask that because a lot of times we find that if a marketer gets any kind of analytics, it's usually out of a centralized function, and they're kind of multitasking across, a bunch of different initiatives above and beyond marketing.
Yeah, so it's a good question. She reports into our head of data science. We are a data product. That's a lot of what we sell as on a SaaS-based solution. We have a lot of data on companies and markets and the changing times. She works for the head of data science, but she's dedicated to marketing. So I have 100% of her time, and I work very closely with the head of data science to make sure we're aligned on priorities. But we had so many big things that needed to get done that we really needed a dedicated resource for it. It wouldn't work with just 20% of time of a data person. It just there was just too much that really needed to happen there.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
And how about elevating for a moment? And you were talking about kind of the funnel stages. What's that conversation like, maybe even with your CEO? Do you get into MQLs, or what's the dialogue that you're having that others outside of marketing understand what it is that you and this data scientist are measuring?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and it's something that, and actually I've seen some posts recently on LinkedIn talking about this topic, but this idea of looking at business metrics versus marketing metrics, right? I think that's like, as marketers, we get caught up in like, what's our open rate? What's our click rate? How's LinkedIn performing? What are we paying for a Facebook ad? Like, what's our cost per click? Like, what's our cost per acquisition, right? And like from a CEO perspective, like, I don't want to say they don't care. They care, but they want to know how the business metrics are moving. And that's really what we just spent a whole bunch of time working with our head of revenue operations, the head of sales, our head of finance, and the head of marketing, myself, and to make sure that we had the right way to measure and look at like the performance of the business. So like his fundamental questions are, do we have more or less coming in the top of the funnel, right? And then are we doing a better job at converting them in the middle of the funnel? And are we doing a better job at closing them at the bottom of the funnel? So if you really start thinking about the business metrics, if it's a Facebook ad or a webinar or a nurture campaign that does it, becomes much less important if we're able to show the progress of how marketing is able to impact and affect that. So that was like such a critical part of it. But that's like, I'd almost say it's like the basics. That's like the starting point for how we do it and have the conversations. But then the beneath the covers part is like, it gets a little sticky.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Attribution always, it's like a black hole for a lot of companies. In fact, I'm thinking about even kind of the maturity of measurement. You've got some companies that have just basic Salesforce reporting, some that take first touch, last touch, and then you've got different models, U shape, V shape, W shape,
right.
Alphabet shape, whatever the letter is. I guess a couple questions on that without, divulging, your success metrics, but what kind of technology enables that data scientist? Because I imagine, that you're talking about some pretty sophisticated analytics here. So you probably have a supporting package around that.
Yeah. So when I came to the organization, I've been there a little over a year now. When I got there, they had just implemented a BI stack, which was, Amazon Redshift is kind of the data warehouse on like as the foundation. Segment is kind of like our middleware, if you will, that connects to everything. And then Looker was like the visualization tool on top of that. From a marketing side, we were like HubSpot, Salesforce, that's like the usual stuff. And then everything feeds into the data warehouse and then visualized up in Looker is the idea. It's not always a perfect world. And the thing I'd say is, for anyone that's gone through this, and this is the second organization with almost the identical problem, was that when that BI stack was set up, like whatever the marketing like say so was in it, like they were pulling in certain data, but they weren't necessarily pulling in the right data. And like the business case was probably different at the time. I'm sure there's lots of reasons for it. But when we started really diving in, we realized that it didn't have everything that we needed. So we had to go back and say, okay, what do we need in there? What should be pulling? And then what are really the analytics we want to see? Like, I think that's the other point of it is like, and I think this is part of like even the discussion in the hiring of this person. The idea was not more dashboards. The idea was not more reports. And that's like, I got here, there's thousands of reports everywhere. You can measure anything and everything. But if it's not something you can make a decision on, and I know this is like the basics, right? But like you don't need to go that deep in some cases. In other cases, you certainly have to go very deep. But I think it's understanding like when you have enough to go make a decision that's going to drive something different. You can cut data 1,000 different ways, and you can waste a lot of time and a lot of energy in doing that if it's just going to tell you the same thing that you already knew from looking at it the first time you saw it. So I think that's also a really important part of like, let's just stop. Like, I don't want 100 dashboards. I want one dashboard, or let's say, okay, 2, and then that's it. And then like, okay, what are the key things we want to look at from a campaign specific area? And then it's just a matter of those systems being synchronized. And that takes some work and some doing, right? That's not an easy process for a lot of organizations.
No, it's a hell of a journey. In fact, I was just thinking about that from a head of marketing perspective. You're on the Budweiser hot seat for results. Yeah. How do you, I can imagine the iteration and the change of reporting and the communication that has to go behind that. With this journey, like bring us through a little bit about what that was like, because I imagine, I'm thinking back to a lot of other clients. A lot of times we like to just put the goalpost in and measure from a certain point onward. It sounds to me like you're almost having to kind of get some information and pivot that goalpost a little bit. So what was that experience like? And what was the dialogue internally?
Well, it's interesting, right? So like you come in and you're like, well, what are you going to, what are you going to drive? What kind of good are you going to do for me? We just spent a bunch of money on a whole bunch of stuff. You're hiring people. Like, what's the result? So that's an ongoing conversation, right? To make sure that you're measuring properly, but you're aligned on measuring the right things. And I'd say like one of the things that, and it took a little while to get here in in the conversation. Like one is, I'd say the CEO is great, like in that his ability to say like, hey, you like let's look at it. If you're telling me we're measuring the wrong thing, let's measure the right thing, but just come back and tell me how we've improved it and what's happening, right? So as long as we're able to show the data behind it, that part was an easy part of the conversation. The hard part was getting to that point, and that really understanding that a lot of the assumptions you have, even going into an organization, right? Like most companies you go into, right? Leads come in. The ones that I'm going to pass to sales are a qualified lead. You call it an MQL, whatever you want to call it. The ones that move on from there are an opportunity. So it's usually like one main funnel that you're looking at of how to drive. In the case when we started looking at, because it's a complex organization, and there's a big outbound team, there's a big inbound team, right? So how do you then what we started to learn quickly is that there's not just one funnel. Like you can't just look at it that way. So there's many things going on, and a lot of the assumptions that went in were actually incorrect. But we were able to back out and see that, and then make the adjustment. So now we got a clean way to look at it. We understand what's working and we understand what's not. And then we all kind of are able to focus on, okay, here's the thing. Let's put our focus on this and go and run and kill that, you know?
So the CEO, it sounds like the CEO gave you some latitude to kind of make those adjustments. And I think that's a really, if so, that's critical that you're able to bridge that relationship, because I found even as an operating CMO that not every CEO is receptive to that kind of pivoting. So you must have done something there expectation wise, at least different from what I did back in the day. But is there any insight as to what to do there or how to do things?
I think the key was there was no, I wouldn't say it's me. I'd say the key there was the relationship with the other leaders in the organization. And I think it was like the fact that with our senior vice president of sales, you know, who's amazing and incredibly talented and has built a wonderful organization, we work extremely well together, and we're very much aligned about where we're heading. So like that sales marketing relationship, I know sales marketing alignment has been an issue for some people. That's a recurring theme. Like I'm very fortunate in that I don't have that issue. Like it's a wonderful situation there. We have a new head of revenue operations. We're very much aligned about the way to look at it. So I think it's about having that, like, the right folks and everyone looking at it a certain way. And then it's a very easy conversation to have and just say like, okay, this is the way sales, rev ops, and marketing and finance all think we should look at it. Then it's a very different kind of conversation than like the crazy marketing guy thinks we should do this.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Maybe just kind of pivoting a bit and kind of taking a step away from marketing. Outside of this passion for measuring marketing impact, what do you like to do, or what occupies your time outside of the measurement of marketing?
Well, I've been playing drums since I was 10 years old, so which was just a couple of years ago, I think. And that was my passion. I was going to be a rock star, I think was the original plan, but that didn't quite work out. So this is plan B, I guess you could say. But my COVID quarantine experiment has been, I've been building like a small home studio to be able to record drums. I have a buddy who has a recording studio, so he'll send me tracks, and then I'm trying to figure out how to record them and play drums. So it's been a lot of fun. So that's my it's kind of my home project and driving my wife and kids crazy, but it's a lot of fun.
Well, if you have any extra tracks, I'm looking for an intro and an outro for this live stream. So I would welcome any kind of creative music to potentially add to,
all right.
To this.
You should hear it first before you ask for it. That's all I'm saying.
Awesome. Well, hey, Forrest, I really appreciate you making the time today, and thanks for that actionable insight. And look forward to kind of keeping in touch.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure to speak with you.